Good morning and welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran. I want to welcome you today. We're just a few minutes late getting started. We had a LAN cable decide to back out of a computer, so Rob couldn't connect via Skype this morning. So don't you hate it when the cable, everything's up and running? You're like, where's Rob? How come he's not here?
Yeah, and how do cables just magically pop out of their socket, right?
I reached back there and I touched it, and it just moved a little bit. And we're getting feedback somewhere. There we go.
That was me, guys. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine.
But anyway, needless to say, we're here. Hey, everyone, welcome. And, of course, we have Mr. Rick Calvert from the New Media Expo and the Podcast Awards with us this morning. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, guys.
So glad to have you here. I know we just kind of jumped right into things. I did want to just take a second and Rob, how's things with you? Everything going good? Anything exciting right off the top of the head that you want to talk about in the podcasting space, or?
No, not necessarily. I'm really excited about how many companies are getting into the space and how many people are really excited about the future of this space. I know Todd, you and I have been working in the space for 10 years or so, and it just seems like we're kind of at a serious inflection point here where a lot of broadcast radio folks and a lot of just new technology people are really looking at the space, and I can see a lot of and I've been saying this for years, that the streaming music platforms are really kind of moving aggressively into spoken word right now, and I think a lot of it is being driven based on a lot of them are trying to reach new audiences, and they're seeing podcasts as a way to actually do that. But it's not going to be too much longer before all the streaming platforms are going to have some sort of spoken word content on them, and it's going to be primarily podcasting.
Well, I had a call earlier this week. Actually, it's been like the week of calls. I don't know what it was with last week, but had a call from a company that we've been working a relationship with, and we know that they're working on something. And I'm like, hey, folks, we're ready to NDA up as soon as you guys are. And it is one of those things where there's a lot of people holding stuff very close to chest too.
Yep.
So when people are not talking and I'm asking direct questions about certain things, I know very obviously that they're working on stuff, which is good. And Rick, of course, you're on the front line getting ready to, put on this big event in Vegas in April. What is it that you hear from vendors as you're talking to folks and, looking to get exhibitors or people pumped up about the space?
Well, like you, we hear lots of secrets that we have to keep, like you said, close to the vest.
Right.
Yes.
There will definitely be new brands at the show this year that people haven't seen before. There'll be new technologies that people haven't seen before. And I think, we talked about it from the beginning. I think you're going to see, as Rob mentioned, a lot of traditional radio people over in the new media section going, what's going on here, and how do we get involved? I think this year is the year when podcasters really want to be a part of the podcast pavilion and do a live podcast, because I think people are going to be there looking for talent. So there's just so many things that are going to be happening. It's hard to list them all, honestly. I mean, it's just like you said, Rob, you called it an inflection point. It's a tipping point, a turning point, whatever you want to call it. It is a moment in history for new media right now.
And I'm also finding that they're trying to figure it out. A lot of, I'm not saying head scratching, but I know that there's a lot of, they're playing catch up. They got a lot of code to write, and and it's like, oh my God, we got to do this, and unfortunately they're going to have to learn all these lessons that many of us have learned over the years the hard way. And
I'll tell you one little example, Todd. We talked about on your show before. There are a lot of vendors at NAB that sell effectively a little plug-in that allows radio shows to podcast their show. And then there are people who do live streaming as well. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, well, do you have, a chat attached to that, like you guys do right here? And they just look at me kind of funny, like, what? I'm like, yeah, we've been doing that for years with new media. It's not hard. And they just, there's things they don't think of because they've done it the same way for so long.
Yeah.
But now, again, the important part is now they're paying attention. In
Right.
the past, I might have just walked on and they're like, who's that nut? Right? This year, they're going to be paying attention to those things.
Well, and it's also interesting is that our consulting stuff is, I mean, it's exploded. We're doing, it's really it's just, I mean, it's incredible. I never thought we would do as much in consulting, and it's actually becoming a bottom line point, and we try to keep it affordable, for the podcasters, and it's the point now from a consulting standpoint that I'm probably going to have to add bodies just to handle the consulting load. And and I can pay someone's salary on just doing the consulting stuff. That that should set people back and make you go, it was a onesie, twosie, threesie, foursies a week, and now it's we could probably do 4 or 5 a day. And typically what we've seen and the feedback we're getting is that the majority of folks that are out there that are doing consulting, people can't afford them. So we basically have got the barrier set to the point where we feel comfortable charging what we charge, and the folks that and that just drives us an incredible amount of business. So I'm happy about it, but at the same point, I was actually talking with the team a little bit. It's a little bit surprising, and that wasn't our main purpose, was to be in the consulting business.
Yeah. Well, and also, I was just thinking about this, is that podcasting is not necessarily that hard.
No.
It's just there's things about it that are a little counterintuitive to new people that are coming into it. I think that there's a lot of assumptions that people make based on their experiences in other mediums that kind of make them kind of like not get it, right? And I think it's not a significant shift in difference between the two, but it's just enough to make you either appear to look like you know what you're doing and not, and I think that's a fine line that is difficult, I think, and it's going to become a bigger issue here over the next year as broadcasters come into this space and bring a lot of their biases from broadcast into the new media space. And then, it's kind of up to us on the new media side to kind of help educate that and kind of bridge that gap between those two in perception and understanding. So I think that's a big thing, and I'm hoping that the New Media Expo can kind of be kind of the focal point of bridging those differences in perception and understanding about what works and what doesn't.
Let me ask you guys something, if you don't mind. You mentioned, Rob, traditional radio, traditional broadcasters bring in their bias, if you will, or just their experience, the way they've always done things.
Yep.
But another thing that they're bringing into the podcasting space right now in a huge way is talent. There are people podcasting now that are incredibly talented, professional. These people have made a living doing media for a very long time.
Yep.
And I'm curious how that is going to affect podcasters who've been in the space for as long as you guys have. And are they going to say, hey, wait, we could learn something from these people. It's not just a one-way street. Mm-hmm. And am I going to have to up my game now to be as professional as they are? I'm just curious what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think that's always been the case. I think if you go back to the earliest times in podcasting, I mean, a lot of the things that were talked about back in 2005 in the press and in the media are the same things that are being talked about right now. And it early on though it was a blend of big media and more independent podcasters that were in the space. And in some ways, nothing has changed in that way. I mean, I think big talented people were involved, from big media companies back in the earliest times of podcasting, and I'd say the same thing is happening today. So in some ways, the more I think about it, the more and Todd, once you jump in on this too, I don't see that things have changed very much in that way. I think talent has always came from wherever it came from, and the cream always rose to the top, and because it is such a level playing field when it comes to this stuff. Though there are some advantages. I mean, I think looking at Serial is a good example. There are some advantages of being part of a public radio network that gives you national radio syndication, and then being able to build a podcast on top of that. I think is a huge advantage for public radio, and it's really interesting what's happened with public radio over the years with podcasting too, because it's always been a significant play in this space. I don't know, Todd, what's your thoughts on all this?
Well, I think I'm going to take a little different tact.
Yeah.
I think, well, just to address Rick's comment, I think they're going to continue to file in, and because number one, a lot of them are unemployed.
Yeah.
And number two, I think what's going to happen at the show, and this is based upon previous years' experience in being an NAB, there is going to be people on the hunt, and not necessarily scouts or talent agents or of the like, but you're going to have networks over the top, a variety of type of networks that are from every country in the world are going to be there looking for content.
Yeah.
And they're going to be looking there for pools of content. I think an individual that goes to the show, if they are not aligned with someone as a group, where they can say, hey, yep, I've got a network of 10, 15, 20 shows, or I work with this group, I think they'll be at a big disadvantage from syndication type opportunities. Now, does that equal money? Maybe not, but I think what we're going to find is that you're going to have a huge number of folks that are going to be there looking for content. They're going to be looking for content libraries. They're going to be looking for distribution deals. And I just, because as much content is out there, believe it or not, there's not enough content. That's kind of an oxymoron, but it's true.
Good content.
Yeah, a lot of good content for sure, curated the whole 9 yards. So you're definitely going to see us, working to make sure that our libraries are available to, go into other networks and they have deals. Then, I think that you're going to see that on the uptick. Now there might be people there looking for talent. But if you're not a known name already, they're going to take your card and they're going to come look at you. So you better be on your A game in and around the show as they come and look at your, even post show, as they look at your content and who you're associated with.
Yeah. I wanted to also talk about talent. Rick mentioned that's kind of be important going forward, and talent equals supposedly good content, but it doesn't always translate, right?
Not always true, definitely not.
Yeah, so it's I agree that there's a lot of talent that comes out of radio, just sheer radio talent, but it's not as simple as that. I mean, a lot of those guys don't really know how to connect with an audience. They may have a great voice and they may sound really great, and a lot of them are also very local too. And I think that's the biggest issue that I think radio has, is that it's been such a local medium, and podcasting is not a local medium, and so that's where it kind of disconnects. Until podcasting gets to the scale of radio, honestly, it's not going to be a local medium. It's a nationally. It's so talk radio shows that are nationally syndicated tend to be shows that can become successful podcasts. But shows that are only available in, let's say, Seattle or New York or whatever, typically don't become successful podcasts because they don't reach a national audience, or they don't have a brand that's been built in a national level. So I think that's the biggest challenge that radio has.
And another thing I think we're going to see too is we're going to see more players that are going to be probably announcing directories or sites or integration and that kind of stuff too. So it's all going to be good. But I think as an example, I had received an email a couple of days ago. Someone thought that they were, well, basically, because I have a podcast, I end up on lots of spam emails from new and upcoming, what I would necessarily call competitors. And, I got this email from this guy, and he had no clue. And as I was emailing back and forth, he had no clue who I was, and trying to sell me on the benefits of his system. And it was kind of funny. But the long story is these folks also need to get engaged with the community if they are going to want to connect and resonate with the podcasters at large. They're going to have to start doing a little bit of outreach. I think competition's good, and I'm looking forward to having more people in the space. But at the same time, they can't just continue to do a arm's length type of engagement with content creators.
Yeah. Well, also, the more people that get into the podcasting space and on-demand audio, which is also going to be another term that's going to be used a lot, are those new companies, really engaging with the community? And that's kind of dovetails off of what you're saying there too, as you think about, the IAB's podcasting, group. How big does this group need to be, or are we seeing the beginnings of a podcast association there, somewhat of all the players in the space kind of coming together and sharing market size and sales data and all these kinds of things? Because as this industry kind of grows, there's going to be a need to try and pull it together and get people connected to each other, because we could. And we've seen this before in the podcasting space too. Everybody jumps in and they're all like a bunch of stray cats that are out doing whatever they're going to do, and there's no kind of group collaboration or group communication that happens. People don't know each other, and that's still a factor in this space too. But it kind of hinders the development of the market and perception for investment and kind of building an industry here.
Rob, I think, and Rick, it would be great if you could get, we talked about maybe trying to get one of the IAB folks on a session, but I don't know, we're still talking about that. But, the work that the IAB is doing, I think, is going to be very beneficial to the community. And I've been talking about it on my show, and we've been talking about what's been going on with it in this show. And, but, it's a lot of industry players. And the cost of membership over there is not inexpensive for someone to join. So I don't think the average podcaster themselves, I hope, don't become disenchanted with the process. But I think the folks that are involved are trying to keep it open. I don't know, Rob, maybe it is time for another association, but that's a full-time job for someone. And, it's so hard to remove biases. You got to have someone that's almost outside the community that would run it. I just don't know how that would form up and work without being political.
Well, and it does kind of raise the question, if the center of this kind of podcasting area is with the IAB and like that common ground or that common contact, maybe there's still some way for companies to connect with maybe a person that's associated with that group somehow, or that doesn't have to be a member of the IAB, but at least they can have a connection somehow to share data and those kind of things. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking aloud, because I see so many new players coming into the space, and they're all like separate,
Yeah.
And I mean, I try and connect with as many people as I can, and I've always tried to do that, but I'm just one person. I can't do everything on that.
I'm curious again, because you both talked about this a little bit, not directly in the last couple of moments here. Rob, you mentioned that big players have come into this space in the past, and I know you both remember the very first Podcast Expo.
Yep.
There were some people investing significant amount of money into podcasting, and they pretty much all failed. Todd, you're one of the survivors, actually.
We didn't take money,
which is a good lesson to learn, right? I think the time is right. I mean, there are going to be people that come into the space and fail again. No doubt that's true.
Sure.
But if you look at Podcast One, for example, if you look at Midroll, for example, I think PodTrack is one of those people from early days that's still around. I think that the time is right where enough of them have learned enough about the space where they can bring in these resources now and be successful. Some will fail, but I think some of them are going to succeed in a really big way. I'm curious if you guys agree that the time is right now.
Well, I guess what's the time right for at this point? Are you talking about the
audience? The audience is big enough. I mean, with Serial, you guys are in the podcast community. You know, there are a lot of podcasters who grouse about Serial, and we put a little thing on our Facebook page the other day and said, hey, podcasting was a thing before Serial came around. Yeah. But you mentioned resources, Rob. One of Serial's resources is they have a lot of friends in the media who talk about them.
Right.
Yep.
And they all are saying, it's almost like they invented podcasting, which is ridiculous, of course. But they can get stories placed in national media and in big market media.
Yep.
That's good for all of us.
Oh, yeah.
When all the things that they might say that are incorrect, people are still talking about podcasting. And that makes investors, media companies think about podcasting. That makes advertisers think about podcasting. That makes brands think about podcasting as content marketing. So that's good for all of us. So when I say, is the timing right, I think that another thing is the technology has come along to a place where it's easier to consume now than it used to be. I just think, and it's going to get easier still, I just think that all the pieces are kind of fallen into place now. They weren't quite all there yet.
I do have a couple of concerns, though. My concerns are that the independent shows, the smaller independent shows, it could be. I'm not going to say we're not going to leave them behind. That's our core group, but I think some of these bigger companies are looking for the big play, the big numbers, and just like the media buyers, oftentimes they will say, "Well, it's not worth it to deal with the smaller folks," and it's such a narrow-minded thing. It just drives me absolutely. I'm going to just say it, batshit crazy. Because the volume is all in the smaller shows. This huge ecosystem of listeners, this aggregate of listeners, is the huge volume is in the width. You've got a narrow, very tall group of podcasters that are hitting incredible numbers. Yeah. But the width is much bigger. But yet, that show's only got 3,000 listeners. I don't. That's too small of an audience, and you're just like, pull my hair out. Well, you've just basically did the kiss of death to 97% of the shows out there. So
you touched on something really important there, Todd. But I don't know, Rob, if you want to comment first. I just don't want to forget what he just said.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's been the struggle from the beginning with new media, right? And it seems to me the people that we still haven't quite got there yet are the ad agencies. They're the ones who control those dollars. And they're the ones who tell their brands, oh, that audience is too small, it's not worth the investment. And they haven't invested the time to and the research to figure out how to advertise effectively with small market media. Like you said, Todd, to advertise widely instead of narrow and deep.
Well, what's funny, Rick, is they used to.
Do you agree with that though? I mean,
In the beginning, it was
Yeah.
wide. In the beginning, it was wild, but over the last two
when
or
you say
three,
the beginning, what do you mean?
I
How you
mean,
mean
like
at
let's
the
start
beginning?
2005 to 2011, it
Yeah.
was wide. But since 2011, maybe forward, it's been the narrow. They focused on.
Because enough people have come along that allow them to do it the old way again,
Well, maybe that's
right?
true.
They only did it that way because they had no choice, right?
Right. That's true. Maybe it's true.
Well, and also it's brand advertisers want scale. So as more brand advertisers come into it, they want to focus on shows that they feel safe with around the content. It's what they've always done in traditional media.
But they
And
won't.
so,
But
yeah.
Rob, they won't get the scale that they ultimately
No,
want.
that's right. But they can get a scale that they feel comfortable with, right? It's all about kind of protecting their jobs, right? They're going to advertise in a limited number of shows because they know what each of those shows is about. They know the talent. They can also go brag to their boss, well, I got to add in such and such big celebrity, right?
Mhm.
And but if this buyer goes to their boss and says, well, I bought a ad in 1,000 podcasts that you have no idea who they are or what they are talking about, that's a harder sell for a buyer at this point.
The other thing you just touched on there, Rob, is risk, right? What
Yeah,
you're talking about is
totally.
risk.
Yep.
Every show you advertise on, use Rush Limbaugh for an example. He says something that offends a whole lot of people, and advertisers get in trouble.
Yep.
If you're advertising on 1,000 podcasts, that's a whole lot of risk.
Yeah.
Especially podcasters who don't have producers and don't have other people to answer to keep them in line.
Yep.
They're going to say whatever the heck they want.
I would kind of say.
But brands are averse to risk. That's
Well,
what I meant to
I understand that, but I would argue that there's that much risk, especially if you have
I'm not saying they're
controls
right.
in place.
I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
how they think of it.
Right.
A lot of guys who buy media, I heard Gary Arndt, a travel photographer, said they're trying not to get fired.
Right.
And it's so much easier for them to buy ads the old way and say, hey, this is the way we've always done it.
Yep.
And look, I did it again, and it's doing what it
It's
always
safe.
did.
Yeah, let me just
taking risk.
Let me just redate the insertion order and give them the same amount of money next quarter.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think though what will end up happening is it's going to shift back. It's going to have to come back because these companies will not survive, especially if they are ad revenue. If their sole focus on life is ad revenue, they will not survive if they cannot go wide. It's just there's not enough big shows in the narrow to go around. It just won't happen. I know it. They won't say they know it, but
Yeah.
can't fool me. But unless they can go wide, they'll never scale. They'll never scale to the point where they can be acquired or anything else.
So Todd, that kind of raises a bigger question too of what is it going to take from a technology perspective to enable. I know you've built a platform that enables easy campaigns across let's say 1,000, 2,000 shows, but is there another level of tool or functionality that has to exist for a brand advertiser to feel trusting in advertising in 1,000 shows? I mean, all in one buy. What's
Not until the brand advertisers come. When the
Yeah.
when the DR folks go away, then there is a different, easier solution, and because until the DR folks go away, it's got to be host endorsed. When the brand advertisers come in, then you just drop the ad in. It doesn't have to be from the podcaster, but
Yep.
that's going to just make us just like any other Dick, Tom, or Harry, content, and really then it's who can deploy it the easiest and fastest, and then the podcasters will again end up getting pieces instead of parts as people take their cut down the line. And that's one of the big discussions I had with a company yesterday. I'm like, okay, you want me to do this, but you're telling me you're going to give me that, and then we're going to have to work with the podcasters, and they're going to end up with this much. I'm like, that doesn't work. The pie gets cut too many times. There can't be two hands in between the source of the cash. There can only be one. And
so there's going to be, and I think, Todd, the fallout from what you just said, I think, is that there's probably a much longer tail of mid-size shows, right, that combine with large shows. So you can probably scale up to 1,000 or a couple thousand shows that maybe have 5,000 listeners or more. That model works. And if you look at what Podcast One has done, they're trying to live in that dynamic insertion kind of world that plays to the big brand advertisers that want to control the ad message. Now, some of them will do host-read stuff, but usually the host-read stuff is done by DR advertisers. So
right.
You kind of have this, and I believe this is what part of the shift that's going to happen in the next year is that brand advertisers are going to come into the space more, and it's going to be a requirement to do dynamic insertion capabilities. And it gets back to, okay, how do you do dynamic insertion so it fits in the model of what has built podcasting for what it is today, or are we seeing a rollback to the experience that's closer to broadcast radio? So I think there's this kind of opportunity and then perception thing that's going to get in the way of this potentially if it's not deployed correctly. I mean, I've always been saying that the brand advertisers need to be more open to letting the creation of their spots better fit into the flow of a podcast, right? That's a little different than broadcast radio. It's less of a break, it's more of content, right? So I think it's also an advertising message creation issue as well. The whole dynamic insertion thing is just a technology, right? That technology can be inserted anywhere in the show that can be geo-targeted and all the stuff which fits into what a lot of brand advertisers want. But what's the format of the ad? I think that's the core issue that the industry faces, I think, in this next year, of how compatible that is with the perception of the personal engagement and the personal connection that podcasting has with its audience.
Are you saying we need a Don Draper for podcasting, Rob?
Yeah, there you go.
I think what really is going to happen is I think that the smaller podcasters, because here's the reality: DR is going to always drive a higher CPM. Brand advertisers are going to come in and lowball it because they're looking for volume. And what the smaller podcasters are going to say is simply this: they're going to hold out their two middle fingers, and they're going to say, no, I'm not running a brand advertisement in my show for this little money.
Yep.
So, it's a double-edged sword is what it really is. And
Todd, and it may be that a lot of those smaller shows are going to live in the DR world, and that's just the way it is. It's going to be the top 20% of podcasts that will be able to play in the brand advertising world.
I would suspect it's a smaller number than that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And then if someone's offended today, I'm getting graphic. I'm just, I'm also understanding what's going on with. I understand at least I think I do. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think I understand the mentality of majority of independent podcast creators too.
Yeah. Well, you've been living that world for a long time.
If I don't know, then maybe I need a different job. But
yeah.
I don't know. We'll ask the chat room. Do you guys want? Would you take self-injected advertising into your shows at $3 CPM or $4? Would you take that? That would be gross before cut. That's what we're facing.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, Todd, you're exactly right. It doesn't make sense. Let's see, if your show has less than 1,000 listeners, it just doesn't. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, even 3,000. Or 4,000. Yeah. So,
and how many podcast shows out there are less than 1,000 listeners per episode? There's a lot.
That's a lot. So maybe that's another opportunity, Rick, where you guys can bring in the the Patreon folks and that type of stuff that are, have a different model for the smaller podcasters to be able to raise money to support their shows. And I think a PayPal link on your website is just about as effective. That's what I've been using, but some people, matter of fact, some people poo-poo that, but I think what happens is, and what I've seen is, I've listened to a show and they said, "Oh, go support me over on Patreon," and I went over to their Patreon page and I got 3 people supporting them, and I'm kind of like, wow, that's not a good sign. So do you really want it out there that you only have a handful of supporters on the Patreon page, or would you rather have do that internally on your own website? That's a whole different, it's a little bit of Freud there. But so Rick, what are you seeing? What's been what's the news out of New Media Expo? What are you what's latest and greatest besides
sorry, go ahead.
Beside the podcast awards?
Well, it's all about the podcast awards the last week and a half, 2 weeks. I saw Daniel in the chat room say, aren't you glad to say somebody else is doing it now?
Yeah.
And I feel your pain. It is hard. It is hard.
And it's okay. It's you knew it was coming, so it's
Yeah.
So I guess I know that you guys the site is obviously had its challenges, and a new site's being built. You want to talk about that at all, so that people know what's coming next year?
Actually, I had some questions that people had emailed me too. I thought maybe we could talk about and,
Sure.
Answer on the show too. But there's some of the data. Most of it is up to date. I'd say 90% of it is up to date now. There's a couple of sections that aren't, that I'm going to go work on right after the show. I was telling you before we went on the air. But the truth is, I just couldn't find it. First of all, I couldn't figure out how to change it. So the free people are asking, why isn't that up to date? Because I couldn't find the code to change it.
This site was decoded 10 years ago, folks, and it's not a WordPress site.
And it's really, really tight security that Todd has on the site to prevent cheating.
Yeah.
Which is great. And so just getting where you need to go is a challenge. And
Right.
then trying to find, a simple thing like changing a date. It's not easy.
Right.
So that's why it's not done, you guys. But
And if you put an apostrophe S the wrong way, it
the site blows up.
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very careful. But like I said, I think we found the last missing piece. Our friend
Okay.
Tim sent me an email last night with the mystery keys that I needed. So, and on top of that, our internal guy Sheldon has been gone for the last almost 2 weeks now at another show, the SHOT Show. It's a shooting show. It's 100,000 people, so he's a little busy, and I didn't. He's the guy who knows how to do that stuff. So,
Right.
Anyway, the podcast awards is in full swing now. We're getting lots of questions about it. Todd, I'm sure you've gotten this before. Somebody's asking me, how do I where do I tell my listeners to go to vote for the show? To vote for me.
That's later.
Exactly. And we've said we're not voting now.
Right.
We're nominating now.
Right. That's a comment every year.
Yeah. And so we have to explain how the site goes in stages.
Right.
I believe it's 7 stages. But right now we're in the nomination stage. So listeners are nominating their favorite podcasts. The next stage we'll go to is under review. So we'll have a whole group of people reviewing podcasts in each category, making sure that the podcast actually exists, because Todd, you've talked about this before too. New Media Show, for example, some people might call it the New Media Show. Some people might call it a New Media Show. Some people might just call it New Media Podcast. So you've got to decipher what they're really talking about.
Right. Over thousands of entries.
Yeah. Multiple thousands of entries.
Right.
And then you have to, if I've got the media show and a media show and the media podcast or New Media Podcast, I've got to combine them all into one and say, okay, 50 people nominated that
Right.
podcast, for example. And then there's a lot of work making sure that they've got an RSS feed, making sure they've got show notes, making sure they've got a minimum number of episodes. There's quite a few. You did a very, very thorough job, I think, Todd, and a professional job of making sure that the people that are nominated are quality podcasts, and quality podcasts are going to win. So they're kind of meeting all the criteria of what a podcast is and should be. So then it takes us a couple weeks to review all of those things. Then we'll announce the top 10 finalists in each category, and that's when people can then vote on their favorite shows out of those finalists.
One thing that will help your process, Rick, and we'll tell everyone, there's a link on the website that says register podcast. If you go in there and register your show, and that will give you at least you have a database then of all the actual show names, show contacts, show emails, and in the RSS feed. It'll save you a lot of work because you can use that master file to cross-check things. So if you're a podcaster listening, make sure you register your podcast on the website.
That's another. So one little thing, we want to make that section a little bit bigger because it's not very big right now. We want people to be more obvious for people to register their podcast. But also, you mentioned when podcasts are nominated, sometimes we have questions for people to verify stuff, and most of the time we don't have an email.
Right.
So in the nomination, so unless we know who they are, and by the way, one of the criteria is to have a way to contact them on their site. A lot of podcasts don't.
They don't. Isn't it insane?
Yeah. But who are we to say? Because our contact info on the award site wasn't right either. So we got to give them a little bit of leeway there. I got to understand that. But yes, it is a difficult process. Here, I've got another question I'll read for you. So it says, just Jeff Brown is asking this question. Point 3 of the rules states you can nominate a show for People's Choice or Best Produced and also submit that show to another lower category.
Yep.
I was under the impression you could nominate a show for People's Choice and Best Produced as well as another category. Is that incorrect?
That's incorrect. Well, here's the deal. Okay, let's see. Okay, I can give strategy now. All right, now if you're going to tell your listeners to nominate yourself in Best Produced and People's Choice and one other category, are they really going to do 3? Or shouldn't you just tell them, hey, I want you to focus on Best Produced and category general. Those 2 are the categories I want you only to use. Don't go and submit me other places. Do those 2 categories. Now, why would, let's use some reasoning here that those top 2 categories get the most amount of nominations. There's no doubt. It's when you guys pull the database, you'll see those 2 have the most.
So historically, you get the most nominations for Best Produced
and People's Choice. So if you're going to focus on one, and really what will end up happening, and no matter what we put in the rules, you'll have shows that will submit to every single category. Their show name will be in all 22 categories. It'll become very evident when you pull the category databases. You'll be like, what was this guy thinking? Or you'll see Best Produced, and then it's going to be a judgment call on your guys' part. Okay, what do we put him in? And this is where you're leaving fate in New Media Expo's hands, because now New Media Expo's got to say, well, he was in Best Produced and he was in People's Choice. Let's leave him in Best Produced. So why leave fate to someone else to decide where your show's going to be? You can only be in one. When it comes.
So two things to be clear. The rules state you should pick one: People's Choice or Best Produced.
Yep.
And a category.
Yep.
And then number 2, strategically for your podcast, if to have the best chance of winning, you should pick one.
Right.
Although, as Todd, you stated, a lot of people don't do that. And again, it's not the podcasters at fault. Sometimes it's just their listeners. But if you're a podcaster telling people to vote for you or nominate you,
nominate.
You want to tell them to please nominate us for People's Choice and our comedy category, for
Right.
example, or nominate us for Best Produced and our comedy category, for
Right.
example. That's as you now that Todd said that I didn't.
So here's another little trick that they will do, and people listening to this you'll have a comedy show that will tell their audience, you guys nominate me in general. Don't nominate me in comedy. So then the decision has to be made by the reviewers. This is a comedy show. Shouldn't it be in the comedy category? Is it a general show? No. So you may just absolutely get excluded from a category because you didn't put your show in the right category. If you're going to compete, if you're a comedy show, you better have your audience nominate you in the comedy and let the cards fall where they're made. Because I guarantee you that when they go through and they match up and they look at the sports category, if they've got a show that's 1/10 sports, 9/10 politics, maybe that show should have been the politics category. So thus, your sports nominations have just been, for a better word, plushed. You're just not even.
So does that mean, Todd, that if a show is submitted to general, right?
Yeah.
But it's a comedy show, that nomination doesn't really count?
Well, I'm not.
Comedy.
I'm not saying that. I'm leaving that's up to the reviewers' decision to determine if the show isn't. Come on. It's
Todd, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because we've talked about this offline. The review process. Have you shared that?
I have, and basically, Rick, I sent you a spreadsheet.
Yep.
And it's pretty complex.
Very thorough is the word.
Well, yeah, very thorough. So Rick, so what will happen is that when the nominations close, Rick's team will get 22 spreadsheets, and they'll do the sort and stack and make sure that they get all the nomination counts, and they'll go through and weed out the people that are cross-posted in the wrong places, and they're going to get basically they're going to end up with 440 shows that are going to go into 22 spreadsheets. And really what ends up happening, 220, is that right? No. You review 20 in each category, so that's right, 440. So they're going to have the top 20 shows that were nominated in the category. They're not going to put the number of nominations in the spreadsheet. They'll hold that information back, and they'll give the spreadsheets to the reviewers with the shows in alphabetical order that made the review cut. Now, if it's close, if you've got 10 shows that got, let's say, 1,000 nominations each, and then they've got another 10 shows that's got 980 nominations each, and then you've got 5 more below that are at 960, well, that base will probably continue because the grading scale is enough that those shows that could have been like in the 25th or 26th percentile could slide up based upon the grading on their website. So, it's not unheard of that you go to a site that's got a lot of nominations and they just don't meet any of the criteria and their score goes way down on the grading process. But the grading sheets go to the reviewers. They go through each show, give the grading points. It's pretty straightforward on how they grade it and the points assigned. And then they submit those 3 reviewers each, or 2 to 3 reviewers look at each category, or look at 2 to 3 reviewers, look at each category. When those sheets come back, then New Media, their designated agent, will plug in the actual nomination totals, and it will kick a score. And then that basically, based on the grade sheet and based on the total number of nominations and the percentile fallout, as it shows in the rules on how we curve the score, will basically determine who's the top 10 in each category. I think that's the genesis of it. Yep. So and oftentimes I will have seen, I get 3 spreadsheets back, and there's, a little bit of variation between reviewers, and it's going to happen, but you meld those together, take those
You
three
get an
viewers
average.
and average them, and then what ends up happening is a show will jockey a little bit in the stack, and then they'll make the list. Now, here's the beauty of this. I've seen it time and time and time again. Just because a show gets a lot of nominations doesn't mean they'll win. Matter of fact, it's often not the case, because the second part of the voting, in which most people hate, this is the thing that wait till the comments start coming in for that, Rick.
I've already got those last year, Todd.
It's the engagement factor. We're trying to show, and I know it's a pain to ask your audience to go vote every day, but it's all about proving engagement. And if you can prove engagement, then boom, your audience may come, well, vote for you once and then leave. And if you got a big show, that's not going to carry the day.
One of the complaints, and I think they're legitimate, but we just haven't figured out how to square the circle, is from smaller podcasts. When I say smaller, let's say you have an audience of 10,000 people,
Right.
but you're competing with an audience of 500,000 people, and you get your people to vote for you every day, and they only get their people to vote for them once.
Right.
They still beat you because they've got so many people.
I think you're going to see when you pull the voting results. I think you're going to be like,
Yeah. And you've been through this for a long time.
yeah,
And so the only other way to do it is to have a juried process where there's no voting.
but
right?
where do you find a jury that's impartial?
Exactly. And this is the problem that you've had forever,
Yeah,
right? And look, you look at the Academy Awards, for example. Look at all the controversy this year
Yeah,
about Selma being snubbed and
Clint Eastwood not being nominated.
Clint Eastwood not being nominated,
Yeah.
and all the politics that come into that. This is a much more cut and dried. You got more votes, you won.
Right.
It's really hard. It's really, really hard, and you can argue for both sides. Whenever you've got judges using a subjective
Yep.
system, I think this one's better, then there's going to be controversy
One thing-
because everybody's taste is not the same.
Let's be straight up. People's Choice and Best Produce is a slugfest. Okay, it's going to end up being a slugfest of big shows. That's those two categories. You can almost count on it being a slugfest. The rest of the categories is where the average show with an average audience can and do win the category.
Yeah.
So,
I think
Todd,
if you
what's
look
the
at, sorry,
what's-
Rob, go ahead. Sorry.
That's right. What's the weight between nomination votes and the actual criteria based on the
Okay.
checklists? I mean,
Okay.
is it like equal or
Nope. Number of
Nope.
nominations 40%, quality website design 15%, quality of sound 15%, quality podcast delivery and show format 10%, relevance of content 20%.
Okay.
So there, and how did I come up with that? It was basically when I got done with the grading sheet, whatever I had left over, I gave as the nomination weight. It wasn't scientific. It was. This is,
I thought, Todd, you had just refined this to a well-oiled machine over the last 10 years, and I just find out it's all happenstance.
well, the sheet took a long time to come up with.
No. It is here's a question I have for you, and there's a question I want to
Yeah.
ask that a podcaster had asked, but for you, how long did it take you from when you started the awards to get to the process that it is now?
Oh, it was.
Were you doing this since year 5 or?
And it was probably the first year we didn't have a grading sheet. First couple years, I think the grading sheet came in at 3 and maybe got refined over a year, but the grading sheet hasn't changed much in at least 5 or 6 years at least.
I wasn't kidding. You were very thorough, and it's part of your personality. Anybody that knows you, Todd, knows you're very detail oriented. So, it's. I would have never done it as good as you did.
And there's some things in there that probably are ready for refinement. There's some things that have changed in the podcasting space, and that's where next year you guys will have the opportunity to go in and tweak this thing.
Yep.
And I think it's well do. I think it's time for a tweak on the grading sheet. The one guy was complaining on the Facebook page, well, you don't need a podcast, you don't need a website anymore to do a podcast. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't necessarily agree still based on stuff that we see.
Well, okay. Again, this is a philosophical thing. No, you don't need a website.
Right.
But forgive me, you're dumb if you don't have one. Okay?
You can say that.
I'll say the thing that I say all the time. You don't own Twitter. You don't own Facebook. You don't own Google Plus. You don't own any of these other platforms. The only thing you own in the world of the web is your website. And technically you rent that. But you can keep it for as long as you want. Somebody can't take it away from you or change the rules on you. And if you don't have your own website that you're trying to direct all your traffic to, you're just dumb.
And I've gotten recommendations every year. And you know what ends up being the recommendations? And I don't want to upset anybody, but there's always an agenda with the recommendations.
Yeah, well, they want to recommend something that'll help them win.
Not necessarily. Well,
or they help their friend win.
There's always, you have to, I try to look at it from a 1,000-foot view.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that all recommendations I got had an agenda, but the majority of them. And then another thing people have always asked is, how come you don't have this category, this category, this category? And I basically, Rick, what I told people, you want another category, give me $400 every year for the next 3 years, and I'll put another category on the system. Because that's what I kind of figured was my baseline cost to support a single category.
I could see us adding some categories next year.
And even shuffling, maybe even changing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so another question we have, and Dave mentioned it in the chat room here too, related. This is from, who is this? This is still from Jeff Brown. So Jeff, if you're listening, said the RSS feed included on my homepage is not the same as the one I use to syndicate my show. The one on the homepage, and he lists his URL for Read to Lead podcast. Can you tell if this is sufficient?
Is that the RSS feed for the podcast subscription? If it is, yes. If
the way I'm reading it, no. It says the RSS feed included on my homepage is not the same as the one I use to syndicate my show.
Well, Todd, if they're using like FeedBurner to submit their show into into iTunes, it could be a different feed, and the one that's on the website could be the one that's based on PowerPress or something.
If it's their podcast feed, they're fine.
Right. The simple answer is if that RSS feed you have leads to your podcast, the answer is yes.
Yes.
That's sufficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And then Dave Jackson asked in the chat room just now, I want to make sure I got that correctly. Let's pull that up again. Does the RSS button have to be on the front page?
Yes.
If it's not on the front page, but on an episode, meaning you have to click to see it, does it fail?
Yes. If you have to click to find the RSS feed, it's not there.
And Dave, I'm not looking at your website right now, but correct me if I'm wrong. You've got multiple episodes on your homepage, and then you click it to open it up, and then you can click the RSS feed for that. Am I that right?
Here's the reason why, Rick.
Go ahead.
What's your bounce rate on your homepage? You go look at web analytics, not podcast analytics, and you look at the number of people that come to your front page of your website and what is your bounce rate. I can absolutely guarantee you that the high majority of people that come to a person's website through Google or whatever way they've got there leave. They never go beyond the front page.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The bounce rate's extremely high. So if you don't have the RSS feed for your podcast right there, plain and center, boom, to subscribe, they're gone. They will never subscribe.
And so,
by the way, usually 30 to 40% of your. It's usually 30 to 40% of all of your, or higher, right, of all your traffic to your homepage never go anywhere.
Right.
They bounce to another website.
Bounce.
80%.
Right.
90%.
It's not quite that high, but.
Oh yeah, it is. It is on a normal.
For some sites, yeah.
Very few, but some sites have click-through rates. But in the majority of sites, I think if you go and do look at Google's topics, maybe those people were never destined to be a listener anyway. But at the same point, it may be enough to trigger them, like, oh, this guy's got a podcast. And some people you have to dig 3 pages down to find their link.
Right. So to explain the logic behind why that criteria is there, you're saying this is a best practice. And it's,
in my opinion,
well, yeah, in your opinion, and definitely some people disagree with you. A
right?
couple are disagreeing with you now in the chat. But I would say it is a, Rob, you tell me if you disagree, but it's a widely held opinion. You're not alone in that, Todd. A lot of people would agree with you. Some disagree.
If you don't, I will never. It blows my mind. I'll go to a podcaster's website and the iTunes link will be there, but not their RSS feed.
Yeah.
And you're going to find a lot of that. Oh, and that doesn't count. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to be completely inclusive. We're trying to get the Android folks on board. We're trying to make sure everyone has an opportunity to subscribe. You're a podcast. Your most valuable thing, the absolute most valuable thing that you're going to be able to drive new subscribers, and you don't have it on your main page? Are you insane?
So again, people are asking about this in the chat right now. MG Dell says, would a landing page be okay, not the home page?
Is there an RSS link on your webpage that allows people to grab it and subscribe? If the answer is no, then the answer is no.
Okay.
At least that's the way we've been grading it.
Yep.
Yeah. And some shows will have a like an episode page that has all
That's
the
fine,
episodes
sure.
listed, and that's where they oftentimes up in the upper right hand corner they'll have a link to the RSS feed, but that's not on the homepage.
You're going to have networks. When you go to ESPN, you go to their ESPN page, you're not going to see the RSS link. But if you go to the ESPN's podcast, not show page, the RSS feed's there. That's acceptable if you're a network. And you go to the podcast main ESPN page. We're talking about, in most points, individual podcaster. You come to geeknewscentral.com, you're looking for Geek News Central Podcast, the RSS feed's there. If you're going to ESPN and you're going to whatever sports show, if you go to that specific sports show's podcast page and the link's there, that's fine. It's, because you're going to have people like, you're going to have folks that are going to have main websites that are not going to have any podcasts on the main page, and there's going to be a click to go to find their podcast. So there's a gray area there. Okay, so if they're a network, and again, there is the gray area, but so long as the main podcast page for a network site has the RSS feed, I think you're fine. Individuals, it should be on the front page. I know it's a double standard, but it's a hard call, But I just still don't understand why, if you're a podcaster, you wouldn't have the RSS feed on your main page. And I'm just, what do? I give everyone plenty of opportunity on all our sites to subscribe to the show. It's there. Boom. They don't have to hunt and peck and find it. It's there. Come in a mobile device. You can touch that, link with a mobile. That's okay. So it's on every page. I don't give anybody up. Every page you go to my website, it's on every page. It's permanently attached to the sidebar.
Yeah, and Todd, on your homepage, you list all of your shows of your network in a box, right? And each of those shows has a link to iTunes and the actual RSS feed for each of your network programs.
I got it 3 places.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have the audience size if I didn't do that. You know how much traffic I get that just comes into the site every day from Google? I get 25,000 hits a day just from Google. And it's okay, how am I going to pick up 1, 2, 3? But 1, 2, 3 every day over 10 years? Think about that a little bit.
I'm going to bring up another question in the chat right now just to answer it, because it's easier to answer instead of typing. Jason Bryant 12 said, so as you're talking about smaller shows like mine in the sports category, asking people to vote is different than asking people to nominate,
right?
Or is the voting done by NMX folks?
No, the voting is done by the audience members,
by your fans, by your listeners.
And so just so people are not the rules and regulation reads the nomination process, the review process, the voting process. It's all on the rules page. If people take 5 minutes and read that rules page, there'll be no doubt how this works.
just to explain that again. So the site goes through different stages.
Right.
Right now we're at the nomination stage. So all your fans can do is nominate you right now.
That's right.
Once they nominate you, we will review all of the nominees.
Right.
We've got to sort them all out, figure out who the names of the shows.
Yep.
And I think Jason may have missed that earlier. And then we will score each site.
Yep.
How many times you're nominated is part of your score.
Right.
But there are other factors to include as well. What we were just talking about, is your RSS feed visible on your homepage? Do you have show notes? Do you have a minimum number of episodes? There are a couple other criteria too, Todd. Do you have a website? So
And sometimes that's a challenge.
So then we add up those scores for each. We have multiple reviewers in every category. We add up those scores, and then the top 10 nominees in each category are announced as the finalist.
Yep.
Then you ask your fans to vote for you.
Yep.
So.
And typically and if Rick follows the formula that I've given them, the review process, first of all, it's going to take them 3 days to sort the data and get the grading sheets ready. Then they turn them over to the content, to the reviewers, the listener reviewers. That's going to take at least 10 days to get through, getting everyone to get their stuff back, a couple days, so a couple weeks, and then you make the slate announcement. Probably Rick will do a live slate announcement. I'm hoping that's how you guys do it, or however you want to do a live stream.
Put on my tux.
And then once the slate's announced, which, believe it or not, Rick, you're going to get as many people on the live stream on the slate announcement as you will on the actual award ceremony. So you do the slate announcement live, and then 3 days later you go into voting. We give everyone 72 hours to prep their audience for the daily voting for the 2 weeks of the voting.
So next question. Mike Dumont said, I voted on the podcast award. He means nominated.
Right.
Can you please confirm my vote is valid? And what I think he's asking is, do you send a confirmation to say, thank you for nominating, blah, blah, blah?
I don't know how the system is enabled right now. It's if the nominee, I think the system is set up now to send an email that they confirm they got it. That would have to be verified.
That's a Tim question.
That's a Tim question, yeah.
And I'm not sure of it, to be honest with you, Todd.
Yeah.
I know that it confirms when you vote.
Right. Well, here's the thing about we when they vote, it's random. No. Can't remember. I think it does confirm when you vote. But what you'll have to do, Rick, at the end too, is you're going to have a pool of votes that were never confirmed. You're going to have to look at those. That's part of the process too, to say, okay, was this the guy just didn't hit the confirm link or not? You'll see trends if someone has tried to stack the deck and used 100 different emails, because it'll be boom, 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 boom. The same show will have, dozens of non-verified votes. It'll be very evident that someone's tried to cook the books.
Daniel J. Lewis is saying when he nominated someone, it did take him to a confirmation page to say, we've gotten your nomination.
Okay.
Hey, Todd, did you ever think about, or Rick, have you thought about, as nominations come in and as sites register, right, to own that podcast in your system, that there's like a way for a listener to search for nominated shows already, and then have a way to just click a link to nominate, but not actually have to enter the title and the RSS feed.
That's going to be V2.
Okay.
Yeah. I like that idea, Rob. Another thing we want to do, again, it's just harder to do with the code. I've got somebody working on it right now, is to add a tweet button to say, I just nominated so-and-so, or I just voted for so-and-so.
Right.
To increase that kind of social sharing.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if that person coming to the site can just find the podcast, and then that's an incentive for the podcast to get in there and register, right, and to own that podcast in the podcast awards system. Yeah, I've been actually a person that's been moderating the Webby Awards for many years, and they kind of have a similar way of doing it. So shows get registered in the system, and maybe this combination of nomination and registration needs. I'm not sure how you juggle that, because you definitely want to get new shows to be nominated
Yeah.
that aren't registered, but there's got to be some way to connect those things somehow more. And I'm not quite sure how to do that, but yeah.
One thing too is that people also need to remember you nominate once and you're done. So if you only nominate one show and you hit submit, you're done for the year. The other 21 categories are left empty.
Again, just to reiterate that one, because that is a significant difference between nominations and votes.
Yep.
You nominate once, period. And again, as Todd said, you need to nominate in every category that one time. You can't go back and say, I wanted to nominate somebody else.
You fill the sheet out one time, and when you hit submit, pow, you're complete.
And again, to clarify, on the homepage, there's right smack in the middle. It's got every category, and you can pick a show for each category that you want to nominate. And once you submit, your nomination is submitted, and Daniel said he saw it on the verification page there. You're done. You can't do anything else until nomination period is over. When voting comes, you can vote once per day per category.
Right.
So.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that was the questions that I had from folks this week about podcast awards.
And direct all questions to Rick.
But Todd, I'm sure you did this before too. It's kind of easy to answer them during the show, and you can answer it for multiple people at the same time instead of sending the same email 1,000 times.
And it's, be honest with you, what I would do if someone has emailed me and said, can you verify my vote? I would keep those in a pool. I would say, yes, we will check. I kept all those emails in a pool. And then when we got into the database, I went and looked for their email address to see if it was in the system.
To make sure that got in there.
Yeah. So, and you're not going to get a lot of those. You're probably going to get 20, 25. And I did take the time and go through. I didn't send him a confirmation email. I said, yes, we will look. But I did always look. And it just was, because you never know. It could be one or two nominations. Could be enough to flip someone. So, we try to be very inclusive.
So, outside the process of the awards, the big news, you guys talked about it last week, is the host.
Yeah.
Our friends at Podcast One have helped us get Dennis Miller, which I'm a huge fan of his, and to show you how old we are, I asked my niece, do you know who Dennis Miller is?
No.
She's like, no, who's that? And Emily Morse from the Sex with Emily podcast, and that was Rob's suggestion. So two great podcasters, both also with traditional media. Dennis Miller, from Saturday Night Live, and he's had his own radio show for years now, and had his podcast now for years. Obviously done stand-up forever. And Emily has been up at, Rob, I think you told me, or Todd, one of you, she was at the very first Podcast Expo.
Yeah, Podcast Expo, yeah.
So she is OG, going back to the very first Podcast Expo and Podcast Awards. And we're super excited about having them as hosts. And we're going to have a little red carpet this year for the Podcast Awards.
Nice.
Oh.
Being the 10th anniversary, I'll tell you now, we'd like the podcasters to put on their fancy duds.
Mm.
And Todd, you always dress up nice for the show.
I've only dressed up nice once, but I will dress up nice this year.
But I think David really kind of set the tone last year with the tux,
Well,
right?
yes, and Leo the year before, yeah, two presenters with tuxes, and I was like, man, I can't just get away with a polo shirt anymore. So.
We've gone big time here, haven't we?
Yeah.
So,
one thing I think it's going to be cool about Dennis Miller and Emily Morse, and they're going to be. We need to have fun. It's a night for podcasters to have fun. The Oscars folks, they have a great fun. Golden Globes have great fun. We want to have fun, and I think Dennis Miller and Emily are going to make the awards fun. It's going to be edgy enough that people are going to laugh and have a good time. I think it's really, and nothing better than a little bit of, I would say mini roasting going on. That type of stuff will be good. I think it's going to be fun.
And now they've got, last year with David H. Lawrence. Leo did a great job a couple years ago.
Yeah.
David, I think, raised the bar a little bit
Oh,
last
yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And so, they do that with the Oscars and those other award shows. People are compared to the host the previous year.
Yeah.
So we'll see how Dennis and Emily do. I've got high hopes.
And I just I think that it's anytime people can laugh and we can laugh at ourselves and also at the same time honor the awardees. I think it's a good thing. I really do.
And like you said, it's also a reunion.
Right.
There's so many people there that were at that first podcast expo and the first podcast awards. It was really great a couple of years ago when Leo was kind of reminiscing. And everybody, I heard after at the reception, people talking about those first couple of podcast expos. That was a lot of fun. So I agree. We're looking forward to, like you said, and again, we will now, it won't just be us there, the new media community.
NAB's going to be there.
NAB people will be there. And I just talked to them yesterday, by the way, one of their VPs. I mean, they're very excited about this. And in other news, I can tell you, NAB is going to give us a couple of buses for independent content creators to ride from LA to Vegas.
Wow,
that's great.
And so we're going to start. They didn't tell me exactly how people are going to reserve their seat on the bus, but if you've been thinking, how can I get to the show? For at least a couple hundred people.
It'd be nice we could do if they'd have done one East Coast and one West Coast, but yeah, I know.
Next year, I think they will. Actually, it's a lot farther coming from the East Coast. Obviously,
tell the NAB guys you need a cruise ship too.
Cruise ship. There you go. Go through the Panama Canal to get there, right? Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
A plane, chartered plane.
Yeah.
Maybe Norm can help us with that, Rob.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen at the awards itself. It's going to be in a huge venue, right?
Huge.
It was the same stage that Bill Gates did his keynote for Comdex and CES for many years. That's where it's at, and I think that room has a capacity for like 2,000 people or something like that.
Yes, and the NAB folks have this massive stage and AV setup. I mean, we've been proud of the setup that we've had at New Media Expo in the past, but this is another level. So,
and I'm glad I'm not in control. I'm in charge of the graphics. I'm glad your guys are handling all that. Woo!
Yeah.
So it's going to be live streamed, I assume, right?
Live stream on Podcast One this year.
Yeah.
They're providing all of that stuff for us. And we'll live stream the whole award show. We'll be also live streaming from the show floor during the day every day, different shows. I think you guys are going to do an episode there from the show. I know Daniel J. Lewis has been asking about doing an episode. We're actually, Dave Jackson is setting up a sign-up sheet so podcasters can sign up and do their shows live from the show floor. And if you're not going to stream it, you could record it. We'll give you the file afterwards where you can upload it yourself. And yeah, we'll be streaming the podcast awards. And I think it's important too to mention we'll be doing the next night the Web TV Awards, where I think podcasters should hang around and check this out for us to something for us to aspire to for next year, because that red carpet is a big deal. Lots of celebrities and lights and paparazzi, and maybe next year we'll kick it up another notch for the podcasters. But we want to go too far too fast. You don't want to have a culture shock there.
One thing too, and just talking about the show in itself, if folks have not been to NAB, they're listening to this, that are going to be coming to NMX, which of course is NMX is co-located with NAB. I guess, is it even I don't know if that's the right word to use, co-hosted or whatever it is, but the main thing is the show's a monster. So be prepared, hydrate, get sleep, be prepared to see a lot of stuff. I mean, There's a lot to see. Rick, how are you guys working the sessions this year? Is there going to be a day that there's no sessions going on where people are just going to be doing the show stuff, or is there sessions every day?
The first day, the 13th, there will be many fewer sessions.
Okay.
So I think there's only like 4 sessions that day, 4 per hour.
Yeah,
And then the next 3 days expands to the full
I
lineup.
gotcha. There's a
But
lot.
yeah, there is a day where you can really kind of walk the show floor.
A day to walk the show floor.
Well, I'm saying, with no distractions.
Oh,
So that's probably the day you want to go all the way to South Hall, right? And then work your way back.
You can't get through it in a day. I'm just telling you. You're going to be it's you might walk the show the whole day in a single day. I'm not kidding.
You could do it if you got a purpose.
If you have a plan, if you went through and looked at the sections that you want to hit and stuff that you want to avoid, you can.
By the way, we've always told people this to have a plan, but this year more than ever.
Oh, yes.
Todd, you brought up something in a private email the other day. I have already mentioned to the NAB folks that
yes.
they didn't have a podcast category for exhibitors.
Right.
So I'm working on that with them now.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're a big boat. I don't know if they can turn that fast and we can get it in there this year,
Right.
but hopefully so, but definitely for next year. So exhibitors can say, hey, we've got gear for podcasters and gear
Right.
for content creators.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what it was is, I'm sure they're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, we need to fix that. So.
Yep.
And it's basically for the exhibitor directory, and as you're searching through and trying to find stuff, and we try to use enough keywords in our description that people will find us, but it's always a challenge.
1,100 exhibitors.
That's what they're up to. NAB is 1,100.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of booths.
And CES is 2,500. So,
yep.
And you can't cover that in a single day.
Well, it's in 2 different buildings.
4 last year or this
you
year.
got to take a bus to get there. It takes you an hour and a half to get over there.
So when you guys say that you guys were talking to the NAB about a podcast area, so that's a podcast area inside of the NAB exhibition area versus the exhibition
NMS.
for the New Media Expo.
What we were talking about, Rob, is in the exhibitor directory, there's a book. They give you a giant book at the show.
Or
and
an
then
app.
online where you can look up, and an app, where you can look up exhibitors by category.
Yeah. Okay.
They don't have a podcasting category right now.
Yeah, because
okay. It's just the New Media Expo
Yes.
category. Okay.
Well, the New Media Expo, is there a New Media Expo category?
We have our own thing with categories, yeah. So we have our own little directory with categories.
Oh, I don't think I have the login to that.
Yeah,
I've got the NAB login, but I don't have the. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that the New Media Expo categories need to be inside of the NAB category.
Yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yes. Surprisingly, again, I asked NAB about this yesterday, Todd. I don't have the radio stats from them, which are directly relevant to podcasters.
Right.
But for video, web video, there's over 18,000 people at NAB looking for switchers like the TriCaster, web streaming capability, CDNs, other web video stuff. Mm-hmm. So,
just as by the way, I got the chance to use the TriCaster Mini at CES, and anyone that is thinking about doing video, you really seriously need to look at that box. I'm going to buy one this year.
What's it cost?
It's if you get the whole,
$6?
get the whole kit with the switcher, the shipping case, and everything. It's about 10 with the highest unit, but the lowest about 5.
I thought it was 6.
About 5.
5 or 6.
5 on the low end. But if you want to get the, just to be honest with you, I love my control surface. You can use a keyboard, but it's just so much easier to self-switch just by being able to, to flip this instead of click. So it's well worth. You can buy the control surface later, but the low unit I think is about 5. So it's amazing. It is what I'm using here, but for 4 HDMI cameras.
And it's a tiny box too. That thing is only like, what is it, 10 by 7
yeah,
by 6 or something like that.
You can carry it on a, in a backpack.
Yeah.
So, but it's so all that stuff is getting smaller, and I mean, the price point, you could probably build one cheaper, but it won't give you near what this thing will do. So just if you're looking to buy something, that would be the credit card purchase of the year, I think. At least it is for me. I'm going to use it I do a lot of portable events, and I had built my own system, and that thing's going to go in the scrap pile. So, let's see, what else? Of course, New Media Expo is more than podcasting. So you got bloggers there, you got the web streamers, what's the majors for that, Rick?
We've got, again, top bloggers will be there. Gary Arndt, who I mentioned before, he's one of the world's leading travel photographers. Robert Scoble is mainstays. He's at the show year after year. Lots of other top bloggers will be there, and also top web video people as well. Will have at the show. So I can't mention it yet, but we've got a company that pretty much everybody will know who they are, who looks like they're going to be there in a pretty significant way this year and doing a lot of video stuff,
Cool.
Which we're pretty excited about. So for those, this show's a video show. For those podcasters that have a blog, which, Todd, what do you think the number of podcasters that have a blog is now?
Oh, it should be like 95, 98, 99%. It's got to be.
So for podcasters who have a blog, there will be stuff there for you. WordPress has been in the show for a long time. And for those of you that do video, there will be lots of solutions there for you as well. So it's
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that could be one of 2 or 3 different parties. Someone asked, is this show available to be nominated? I'm not seeing any of the database stuff, so I don't know. That's Rick's call. I don't know. It's maybe
the new media show. Could it be nominated?
I think we're a little maybe too close to the
gray area.
Gray yet, yeah. So,
sorry, Todd, you still can't win.
Yeah, darn.
So yeah, it's just a little bit too close to Mama at this point.
Yeah.
Well,
next year.
But it looks like somebody did nominate us.
That's
but
okay.
It's not going to be in the running.
We appreciate it though.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I think I'd asked if you could reveal any numbers as far as attendees goes. How's that going for registration?
So as of this week, we're double registration for last year.
Oh.
So, but again, our numbers pale in comparison. So if we kept up that pace, we get to 5,000 people this year. I don't know that we will. There's so many variables.
Right.
You don't know if that'll keep up all the way through the show. You don't know. We've changed from January to April. Actually, I think that's going to increase attendance, not decrease. But again, you just don't know. But at the moment, that looks great. But when you put, even 5,000 people that we bring next to 100,000 people at NAB,
right.
It feels pretty insignificant.
But it's going to look monster. It's going to feel,
monster. And again, I mean, if it's 10% of the 100,000 people at NAB come through New Media Expo, it'll be 10,000 people.
That's right.
And I already mentioned there's 18,000 of them there looking for web video stuff already. So,
and with podcasting in the news, it's going to be slammed. I'm already worried about we're talking about booth manning, and if we got enough bodies to support the traffic that I know is going to be in the exhibitor section.
Yep.
So if if an attendee registers for NAB, do they automatically get access to the New Media Expo, or is that an additional? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
They can come to New Media Expo, and they can come to the podcast awards.
Okay.
So because we don't have any kind of ticket to the podcast awards or anything like that, so everybody's welcome to come. So I think you probably want to come early this year.
Yeah. And Rick, I know that if anyone's listening that thinking, how do I get more exposure? I tell you what, there's an opportunity here for networks. If you have a network of podcasts, you should really consider a booth. You should consider being there and hanging your banner and talking about your content. You may not get as much traffic as someone selling a video switcher, but I think there's going to be enough traffic to justify the cost of a 10 by 10. Get a table, some chairs, hang the banners, have the content playing if you're doing video, or you team up with 3 or 4 individuals and get a booth. I think it's going to be worth your time to do that. I've been at NAB. We weren't before we exhibited in the NAB over the top section. I can just tell you that if you are doing media, you're going to get a lot of people walking through that are, again, looking for media, looking to make deals with content, that type of stuff. So don't dismiss. I'm not a company. I don't have a product. You do have a product. You have content.
Yeah.
So it should be something you would consider.
I love
Yeah,
that
and I think you
suggestion,
can't
Todd.
really underplay that either, because I think we're coming into a time where it's more and more important for content networks, like you said, Todd, to start building close relationships with the distribution platforms. I think the days of creating a network and then just submitting your show and not having any interaction or any connection or contact with major distribution platforms, those days I think are gone.
And if Stitcher's going to be there with anywhere NAB, you need to, make sure you make time to go over and make an appointment and go over and see those folks. And most of these folks have back room areas where they have places set aside where you can go and meet with someone for 15, 20 minutes.
Yep.
You don't get on their calendar now because they're already booking. I guarantee you they're already making appointments for the show, and it's January.
Yeah.
For CES, we start making appointments in at least 60 days out from the show. We start making appointments with folks. So it's not too early to try to get on someone's calendar. And you can work it into your schedule, not theirs. Basically you can go when you want to and not say, well, I can give you 15 minutes on Friday at noon, and you have to trek half a mile to get to their booth to see them and fight the crowds. You want to set the schedule where it's your schedule. And don't forget about the time-space continuum thing in Vegas. If you think it's going to take 10 minutes to get there, it's going to take you 30.
There's so many things that factor into that, Todd. So the distance. It's farther than it looks.
Yep.
You're going to most likely pass a booth that you didn't expect that you stop at.
Yep.
And then there's the people that you could run into.
Right.
That say, oh, hey, I haven't seen you in 10 years. Or, hey, you want to do business with that person. And you may not see them again. You need to talk to them.
Yep.
So, yeah, you need to give yourself time in between where you need to be get from point A to point B.
And here's another thing to think about. The bigger the booth, the more handlers there are. There's more people between the desk, the entry desk, and being able to talk to the person you want to talk to. Smaller the booth, usually 10 by 10, the owner's right there. When it's a 20 by 40, 40 by 40, 100 by 100, acre by acre, you're going to go through many layers to get to the person you need to. And that's going to take time, too, if you haven't made an appointment or set anything up.
For those really big booths, by the way, which, you've never seen anything like that at our show. So unless you've been to CES or NAB before, look for the reception desk.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of just wandering around asking people, because there are literally so many people in a booth that the person you're talking to may not even know the person you're looking for.
And they may work in the same
for the company.
Right.
So you want to go to the reception desk, ask for your person, and then they usually got a way to find them somehow there.
Some booths have paging systems.
Yeah.
And don't ask the booth
rosters,
babe
schedules.
any questions about any of that, because they're not going to know anything.
No technical question.
Yeah.
And but and if you haven't, I know the flu season might be over, but vitamins and everything prior to the show, and sleep.
Hand sanitizer.
Oh, yeah, and to keep it on you.
Yeah.
They actually have that at the Vegas Convention Center now. Some little stations where you
Yeah.
can get a little squirt while you're walking by.
Yeah, and get used to doing this instead of this. If you have to wipe your nose, do it with the back of your hand as much as you can, because you're going to be shaking 1,000 hands.
Yep.
So it's just stupid things like that. Or you could get back from Vegas and be sick for a week. It sucks. So I think we're almost out of time here. We are out of time. Any questions for the audience?
For us to ask them, or for
Yeah,
them to ask us?
they're just asking. Yeah.
Daniel's saying he's not seeing a lot of booths on the NAB site. I mean, there are a ton of them there. So Daniel, I can show you if you're not seeing them for some reason.
Yeah, just go to the NAB. Let's see, NAB exhibitors. The exhibitor directory. Let me go to Map Your Show, and let's look at the floor plan. Let me bring up one.
If you look, this is one thing actually that hopefully will be better in 2016 than this year. There's a lot of stuff that our attendees are going to want to see in the South Hall. If you look at, I think it's Lower South, Todd. New Tech is there, live stream is there, and then Sony, of course. There's a bunch of companies in the Central Hall. Sony, Canon, Panasonic. Those are those kind of great big ones that you see there. So
that's like South Hall Upper.
And that's a half mile, just so you know what you're looking at there from front to back.
Yeah, it's a half mile, and that's multiple rows. The tiny booths like down here, that's like a 10 by 10.
Yeah.
And these probably are all meeting rooms back here, or private meeting rooms. So that's just the upper.
Yep.
You wanted to do, North Hall, where you guys are at. Let's just lay out and show. This is where, let me blow this up. I can't. Down here in the right hand, that's where.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly. We're right there. And you can't zoom in right now. I know that you could before. I just had this problem this week. So I'm going to find out from them why you can't. We're just a little to the right there, Todd.
Yeah.
I think you just hovered over NMX.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, yeah, it's
right there.
Right in that section. So.
And registration is just to the right of us.
Yeah.
So.
Here's the key. If you come to the taxi stand and you walk straight in from the taxi stand, you're going to be at New Media Expo.
Hey, Todd, bring that up one more time if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because there is one other, I think, important thing. So where you see the NMX, that arrow, that's the taxi stand.
Yep.
Right? And you go straight in there into NMX. We're right at the front. If you follow that kind of white aisle straight to the back or up on your map, you'll go out of that door. And there's a little alleyway at the very top of that.
Oh, yeah, up
screen
here.
There.
Yep, here. Yep.
And you walk across that little alley, and then you go in to the West Gate, which used to be the Hilton. And that's where all of the sessions are, all the meeting rooms and stuff. And that's where the podcast awards will be.
Yep.
So.
And that's from basically this location to the West Gate is at least 5, 6, 7 minutes walk.
Yeah, I'd say 5-minute walk.
Yeah. And those of you,
if you get stopped, it could take you longer. But if you're walking straight through, it's 5 minutes.
And those of you coming to see us at the show, Raw Voice is right there.
There you go.
Make sure add to your show planner.
And one other thing I'll mention too, Rob, if you bring that up, Todd, if you bring that up one more time, if you go down and to the right, let me close a window here, down into that hallway. Todd.
Yep.
And then down to that kind of main section, that big square area.
Yep.
That's where Callie Lewis will be broadcasting during NAB.
Oh, they're going to have their booth over there in the central area.
In that right corner, just to the right of your mouse there.
Oh, okay.
They'll have a big stage there, and they'll be live streaming the whole time. John and Callie.
So they're bringing their stage to NAB.
They are going to be the official kind of media thing for NAB this year.
Hey, Todd, on that map is the approximate. Well, it is the location for your live stream you did for the CES show, right?
Yeah, our booth was, if you can see the mouse, was right here. This is where we were.
By the escalator.
Right by the escalator. We had a 10 by 20, actually about 10 by 30 right there. That was our broadcast area for CES.
You know it's sick that you've been there that often and you know what that is.
Oh, it's true, but I'm tell you that it's the best kept. You know what? We have, I don't care what anyone says, we got the best location. We could get our vendors in, they get out of the taxi, they come and do the interview, they go back to the hotel or whatever venue they were at. It was traffic wise, it wasn't 200,000 people in the front of the booth all the time. I mean, it's absolutely perfect. And I have another secret about why I like that position. The router that we were tapped into, there was only two other companies on that router, and I won't tell you the type of speeds I was getting out of my internet connection. That's another good
Well, if
thing
you're
about
streaming live video, right? Yeah.
right.
It's good to have
One
that.
more good point there, Todd. You had mentioned, I don't know if you talked about it on the air, but we talked about it offline, that Cox is now the internet provider in the building. Huge improvement over
Huge
Smart City before.
and cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, my internet connection used to cost me $5,000 to $6,000 for a week at CES. I had $1,200 this year. I had 10 down, and I don't even want to say how much I had up. I had 100 up.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah, but it was part of the reason I had 100 up was because I'm in the hall, and not a lot of vendors are on that router. So I had the kind of almost like a connection to myself.
Hmm.
And then another thing is, I'm not going to tell you which hotel. Well, I'm going to tell. If you guys want to know where to get high-speed internet in Vegas and you want to put content up, I had 100 megs up at my hotel downtown.
Yeah.
You ever had 100 megs up in a hotel, Rick?
No.
100 megs up. Stay at the Plaza downtown. That's where I stayed and had 100 megs
Oh,
up.
at the Plaza is where
I
you
had
stayed
100
again.
megs up.
Wow.
Incredible. Who would have thought?
Yeah. That is pretty
It's
impressive.
insane.
Yeah.
Again, the world we live in, you pick your hotel based on your internet connectivity.
Well, and I picked it because it's cheap, you know,
I know.
you know, but and also I'm sick and tired of staying on the strip.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's definitely a lot slower up there in the downtown area.
oh,
Yeah.
you're with the real people.
You're with the real people.
That's right. You're not with the posers.
There's not a lot of taxis that go up there, though. So
No, there's plenty of taxis.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Plenty.
I've sat there waiting for taxis before.
Okay, it's improved.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
plenty.
Oh, has it improved? Okay. Gee.
I'll be staying at the Westgate, Todd.
I am going to be. I'll have a rental car, and so I will be doing the battle to get parking. At least there's a little more parking at NAB. You just have to get there early. That's the key. And don't count on it, but you have to be way early. So,
Well,
Yeah,
Todd,
very-
so years ago, I mean, you used to do live streaming at the
Yeah.
NAB.
yeah, I used to do stuff for live stream, and I've done stuff for other companies. Yeah, we've done live there in years past. I don't think I'll have time besides what you and I are going to do, and then the gadget professors asked me to do a couple things too. So,
Yep.
but
So is there going to be other people that you know that are doing live streaming? Is Callie doing live too?
well, she's doing it live in her own booth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think
Okay.
Rick, you've got some people that are going to be doing live.
Yeah, we'll be having some, again, web video celebrities live streaming.
Uh huh.
And then look at you, Todd.
That was worth its weight in gold. Now, if I could get
Yeah.
one of those for NAB, that would be the major score.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Rob, we'll have multiple people live streaming web video during the show, basically all day long. And the last year at NAB, we set it up. We had set it up kind of like a little mini TV studio with two sets. And so one show was on while the other show was setting up. And then as soon as they went off air, the other show started. So we just did that all day long. And then for podcasting, we have two stations. We bring the gear. So all you have to do is show up. And we have darn it, his name's slipping my mind right now, who's run the podcast pavilion for the last couple of years. But we have an engineer right there who helps us out. And so all you got to do is show up and do your show.
Those of you in the chat room, take Jason's advice in a big way. I actually refuse to stay there because of the above issue. So basically talking about Circus and asking for a non-smoking room.
Mm.
I won't stay there just because that's part of the reason.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Yep.
we're long. Rick, thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys. Always good to chat.
And everyone that's on the live stream, thanks for being here. We appreciate you coming out. Tell all your friends and family members and people that you know in the new media space about the New Media Show at newmediashow.com. And if you're not registered yet for the New Media Expo, go to nmxevents.com or click on our banner at newmediashow.com. That'll take you over to the page. Get registered. Get your tickets bought now if you haven't already. Get your hotels booked. That's probably the bigger thing. As soon as possible because they do run out of rooms in Vegas. It's hard to believe, but they will. And get your airfare in because everyone's converging on Vegas during the show. But look forward to seeing all of you. And good luck for everyone that's being nominated for Podcast Awards. And Rick, good luck with the rest of the process.
Thanks, you guys.
Yes. Yes.
And for everyone else, Rob, what do we have scheduled for? Oh, I think we know who we have scheduled for next week. Go ahead.
I believe we have Daniel J. Lewis is going to come on.
Okay.
So he's going to come on, and it's going to be more of a kind of a podcaster kind of help session,
Okay.
giving some tips around CEO, optimizing your website if you have a podcast. Just a lot of details about how to do your show better. So
Well, it should be a lot of fun and get a chance to get caught up with Daniel with what's going on with him as well. Just
Yep.
as a programming note, we have our annual retreat the weekend of January 7th. I will not be available, so there will be no show on January 7th.
or February 7th. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes, February 7th. But then we'll be back full on. I don't see any issues with any shows after that. But everyone, thanks for being here with us, and we're going to shut the stream down at this point, but everyone take care. We'll see you next time here on the New Media Show at newmediashow.com. I'm Todd Cochran at Geek News Central, and Rob?
I'm at robgreenlee.com, and also I can be found on Twitter at Rob Greenlee. That's 2 E's.
And Rick, where's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
At Blogworld is my Twitter handle. Did I tell you guys the guy who has the Rick Calvert Twitter handle lives about 10 miles from me?
Why don't you go over there with $100?
I have already took him out to lunch. He doesn't use it, and I'm trying to get it from him.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that. Maybe
Yeah.
you need to call some big guys with muscles.
Yeah,
I
there
think
you
we're
go.
going to work it out. A couple more Mexican lunches, he'll come around.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Okay, bye.